fears mistaken, watching, waiting for the boiling rains, which will wash our frigid lives away, taking all our demanding pain, and all our frozen joy, wearing our aimless goals in our empty sleeve, above our hopeless hands, moving on our blithe bodies, to awareness, blind in preoccupation, incapable delights, discussing, alone with yourself who does not know herself, regaling lies with blurred ambition, brittle with anticipation, broken by hope, bleeding on the other side. But just a little flight, it's all we have. Or needling these infinite aims with frenzied ceramic pleasure, waiting for the boiling rain, which will wash our hopes away.
It was my ambition to clothe you, and fed you, and give you every ounce of happiness you ever had. How dare you? You are pathetic.
And written angrily on shredded paper were the words forget and remember. And forget read boldly, seen with blind eyes. It gleamed with heat. It burned itself into his mind. And remember read darkness, near invisibility. It struggled in pain to be understood. It was wrinkled and stained with age and abuse. Between the two words, the beginning. The merest beginning of a tear. Of a tear formed of ecstasy, in agony derived, privileged without understanding, torn, formed from heart and mind. With demanding force conformity, he looks and turns the page. To forget.
Understand what? I don't even know who you are anymore. I couldn't understand you if I tried.
Black bricks are what you throw at me, as I hang from the one thread that you have left me with. I walk on the concrete that you have laid for that purpose, and I hate it. I hate the conformity of it all. I yield to the right-of-way, I drive down the right side of the street, and I do the right thing. Who are you that I should listen? You hold an illusion of power, and I am the beast at the end of it. You build a little house for me and chain me to it. Day after day of drinking your water has drained my strength. Why am I here? What did I do? I have tried! And it was all a lie. I have known it since the beginning, and you have used me against myself, and I hate you for it. You in your high place. You do not scare me, for I am not yours, and you will never own me again. Throw down your words like bricks of hatred. Stone me until I am numb, and if I die, I will be victorious.
Our words are not meant to stone you, but to soothe you.
Disease, like cancer, but twice as hard to battle, twice as hard. Watching this anorexic, sad little girl walk by slowly, deliberately, a blue corduroy skirt hanging low with a loose belt on its last sorry hole 2 inches from pink. Baby pink on a baby tee, raw against deep tanned skin in the sunless winter. Wisps of cherry hair ruffle looking like a castle weakly from her frame, looking like a castle of cards, swaying slightly. 1/4 inch for every hollow breath, exhaled hard, uneven from bitter Maybelline lips, until you're certain she'll topple, and your arm will go out to catch her against your chest, when suddenly she holds her breath, quietly smiling, and stacks another card on top.
You're a pathetic waste of human life. Come with me.
Locking arms with the sky. I look around, but all I see are the caustic lies. They penetrate my being and soul, distorting my views, my feelings, my goals. And now all the world is locked in war, and all society wants is more and more and more. The world is tearing itself apart at the seams, so I go to the only place I'm safe, my dreams. In my dreams, I'm whatever I want to be, a bird, an idea, or a ship out to sea. I don't need to pop a pill or smoke some weed. All I have to have is an idea or seed. The mind is so incredibly vast. You can go forever, never cross your path. You can build your own world, one without war, and one without all these locked doors. I wish the shepherds would leave me alone. They hound my thoughts and follow me home. I need a place that I can call my own, a place I'm safe, a castle, my home. So if you know of a place that is warm and safe, please come tell me. Please make haste. For I am slowly going insane. with all that pounding within my brain.
But how are safe in our society?
Tears of a blonde bombshell. Wet splinters penetrate her manicured hands as she moves them, brushing a strand of Paul Mitchell sculpture behind her ear. Self-consciously, she checks her dress to find the lay is wrong, too wrinkled and soggy from the rain that has long since washed away her mask of CoverGirl Maybelline flawlessness. Unable to look at her image, distorted and true, she leaves the black safety of the storefront to the street where other unwanted Barbie dolls rush home to await the phone call of failure. Anorexic idols with immaculate complexions who spend their lives striving to be the picture of beauty, which society sets for them, striving for an unreachable goal of acceptance as sad, unhealthy twigs of attractiveness, counting calories and worshiping a porcelain god.
Porcelain god? Porcelain god? No, we make our own god. But you are beautiful as a god already. Why would you want to change? Will you come with me?
I'm learning to doubt, like you've trained me not to, like I care where you're leading me to hell. What no one realizes is the disease. The mill closed 6 months ago. I went home and died. Nowadays, my body is slowly falling apart. Disease by hours. Ruthless biting, gnawing, chewing at the bit you gave me, you. My testicles no longer can function like they're supposed to, are falling off my belly. It won't hurt me at all if you kick me. If you'd like, go right ahead. I can still smile and grab another cup of cold coffee to leaven my dead gut. It's the disease. Somebody fucked with my head. A good word, fuck, is, but I've been fucked too much by you. My throat can no longer swallow. My teeth are no longer hard. My eyes can no longer see. My bladder can no longer digest. My genitals have crested over. Vomit pours from my body. It's a disease in my brain. My finger can still point at you. Fuck you.
You will bow down to me!
You know, it's your kind that makes me want to puke.
My mom says that she doesn't think I am a real person because I don't have a heart or a conscience. And I think maybe I don't. And maybe my brains and guts are made of rubber and stainless steel. And maybe those shots I get at the doctor are rust removers and 409. Or maybe I'm not a robot and instead it is like my sister says, that we are observers from space, sending information to a faraway home planet. Or maybe I'm just a shade of a girl, and I am hollow inside, And maybe this is why I can't seem to relate to my peers, and my parents don't know what to do with me. And I can't take care of pets or people very well, and I hate perfume. And I don't know the mechanics of eyeliner application. And why sometimes I laugh. I laugh just because I'm happy. And why I don't ever want to get a job.
I wouldn't hire you anyway.
You've danced in my thighs since I was a child, who hated your every move, and stared me down, standing up to you. Your body, steely eyes pouring over me like chilled pudding on a lifeless white cake that couldn't scream, and endured it, thinking I was stronger for holding my ground. And I covered my own grave that you walk upon, not remembering my motionless fight that I fought against you and my own thoughts that defied me, leaving me as you did while I walk alone, pacing my grave and waiting for the flowers you promised but was broken, as numerable as the maggots in my mind, eating the last crumbs of the cake you devoured.
You're a crumb anyway.
You will do as I say.
My mother grew up in a time when emotions were held inside, not faced. When each day was a routine, not questioned. People worried more about when a bomb would hit, practicing a crouched position each day at school. She says there was no time for soul searching. My father has an illness which puts him to sleep if he's upset or too happy. So his emotions are unspoken and suppressed until they become intense rage, which is usually triggered by me. So they sit at opposite ends of the couch, faces blank. The only eyes they look into cannot look back. They talk and laugh at the television instead of to one another. And they say I should stay home more often, to spend family time together with my brother, the rattling box. And I try to explain how I've lived longer than a lifetime, with memories of Montana settling, wagons and vacant hills, witches burning for their radical lifestyles, or a wart on the nose.
Witch.
Innocents killed for not being Christian without ever being understood.
Witch.
How I am a child of the sun and the forest. How I feel the spirits of dandelions and grass at my bare feet.
Witch.
The spirits within and around me who guide every movement or thought. How if I had a choice, I'd live naked near hot springs, writing poetry and dancing for one special man.
Witch.
How I value imagination and the abstract. But they see the surface only, two-dimensional, telling me to comb my hair, stand up straight, marry someone with a college education, never mind love. My steps are guided into my dark room, where I shut my door to silence the news and police shows. And I light my candles in a circle around me,
Witch.
letting the spirits remind me of who I've always been.
You will burn in hell wet. Let's burn her. She's a witch burner. Marionettes revolt. Splintering, shattering bones. Calcium frame obliterated under your titanium-plated stainless steel nailed fist that is you, society. Corruption, discontent, hate, hate, hate. Shriveled down from fear, eyes, skin, hearts, wilted under your domineering, insomniatic glare. Your organized cage of etiquette and laws and distrust, confining fragile bodies and corruptible minds. We wore your collar and chain, became pets to manipulate, one of the masses, slaves to clear the hidden destruction of your labyrinths, the secrets of those who refused to submit, the souls of those who attempted escape, those unafraid to follow their beliefs.
Next! Step down!
Your promise of salvation from the creative threats that are our souls is pitiful. Your sadistic smile is gutless and wrong. Your image untrue, too suave, too fake.
I will hold you in contempt. Step down!
Your pretty boy demeanor doesn't cut it anymore. Face it, you spineless bulk of oppression and repulsion. We are no longer your jesters. The pets spit back. The marionettes attack their strings with diamond-edged razors.
Next!
Motion foreseen. Struggle inevitable. We will not drown. We will not succumb.
My name is Greg Lenihan, and I teach English at Hellgate High School. And some of these students, but not all of them, were in a class that I have that's called Advanced Creative Writing. We put out a literary magazine. And we decided we wanted to do something kind of, instead of just the last couple of weeks of school, sit there and watch movies, which is what I'm doing in other classes that are less inclined to do anything. We wanted to do something, and we wanted to do something kind of dramatic, and so we kind of brainstormed some ideas, and I got together with Cheryl Nothey, who's a poet here in town, and Tammy Allison, who's a great director and a fine actress, and we threw some ideas at our students, and they dreamed this whole thing up, including how it was all done, and we just kind of facilitated. So it's a totally student creative production. We had some interesting setbacks. We only practiced it one time, about an hour before you guys showed up. And so what you saw was a second draft of things that we had been brainstorming for about a week. And I think it's kind of interesting for teachers and probably for students too, you know, because we always think that it takes so long to do something that's powerful and effective. And I think you just saw that you can do it anytime you want to. Just think it through and then try it a couple times and then invite some people to come. You can do this. I want to thank Elaine Dolson especially because she was kind of the brains and inspiration behind even trying to get this theater and pulling this thing off for a general public like this. And we're going to try to do this same kind of thing again next year. So thanks very much for coming tonight. And I'm going to invite the kids back in, and feel free to hang out and visit. And if you have sons or daughters or friends, mingle with them a little bit, because they were just scared to death to do this, and I think they did a great job. Thank you very much.
Campfire song. There's just 2 words you have to remember, and that's 1, 2, 3. Campfire! 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 No, not seriously. Folks, tonight my program is on the plants, trees, flowers, and how the Native Americans used to use them. And tonight you're going to learn to speak a little bit of Blackfeet. So I'd like you to turn to your neighbor, somebody who you've just met, and say hello to them in Blackfeet. And by saying hello, you just say "Okee." Okee. 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 Istu Wani, Dane Ku, Shelly McKee, Istu Pakuni. And I just said, my name is Shelly McKee, and I am Blackfeet. I am a tribal member from the Blackfeet Reservation, which the reservation borders the east area of from Glacier Park here. And I've worked in Glacier Park. This is my first season, and it's been a wonderful season so far. I get to hike, walk, and talk, and they pay me for all this, so it's been very enjoyable, yes. But my other 9 months out of my year, I spend teaching school. I have fourth graders. There were 26 last year, and I expect to have 25 this year. So I'll be leaving this job on August 28th, and I'll be starting my school job on August 31st. So I guess there's no rest for the wicked. But it has been enjoyable because I get to hike 28 miles a week. And I don't know of any other job that you get to do that on. So I've learned a lot of things. I've been able to meet quite a few interesting people who give me kind of a different perspective on Glacier Park. See, Glacier Park has been out my back window all my life. And when people come here, they ooh and ah, and they just think this place is just so wonderful. Well, growing up around here, you just take it for granted. Well, this year, a lot of you folks have been able to give me kind of a new understanding about the park area, and I just want to thank you very much for that, because you have opened my eyes again to see how wonderful this place actually is. But before I get started with my program, there are two announcements that I need to make. Those are the commercials. Well, like I said, my name is Shelly McKee, and this is my first year up here at Two Medicine as an employee. But I have been able to spend lots and lots of time up here before. I was raised on a ranch 10 miles north of Browning, Montana. Browning, Montana is right in the middle of the Blackfeet Reservation. And my growing up years, we spent a lot of time putting up hay and taking care of cattle. Well, whenever we had a time to be away from the ranch, we would come up here to the Two Medicine Valley. And we would have lots and lots of family reunions. My dad had 12 brothers and sisters, and so whenever we got together, there was a great big deal about it. And so we would come up here to celebrate and have any kind of those little functions. But the most important thing about this area was what my grandmother used to tell me. My grandma was Blackfeet as well, and she shared with me lots and lots of different stories about this area up here. Now, the Two Medicine Valley in Blackfeet is Nocta-Kukasi. Would you like to learn that? Okay, Nocta. Kuka? C. Nocta-Kukasi. That's Two Medicine. And the reason why Two Medicine received its name was because of the river that flowed out of this area. Where you first come in, you may have noticed the lower Two Medicine Lake. Well, that's man-made. The middle Two Medicine Lake and the upper Two Medicine Lake, those are naturally made. They were made from glaciers. But the lower one was made by man. And the reason why that was done was because of some of the water problems they were having on the reservation. But in the earlier days, there used to be a river that flowed through that area. And my grandmother told me that they believed, the Indians up here believed that there was great power up here. And as you look around in the valley, you can kind of see where they may have gotten that kind of an idea. Because as you look up here on some of the areas, there's such a vast beauty and there's so much grandeur up here that it was hard to explain. I mean, now with all of our explanations, our scientific knowledge and plate tectonics and geology, we can explain how the glaciers moved through here and how they carved out the valleys. But in the earlier days when this was first found by the Indians, I guess you could say, it was hard explanations. The Indians just thought the Creator had created it for them. And so the Indians would come up here and sit. They would fast from 4 to 5 days. And they would find a ledge up here where they would sit and they would contemplate whatever problems or whatever they were trying to solve. Well, after they would fast for those days, then they would head back to the medicine lodges. Now, the medicine lodge, one would be on the south bank, one would be on the north bank. And there was so much great power that they had to put 2 medicine lodges so that they could get bring all the power into those 2 areas. Well, what they would do then is they would go in and they would sweat for 4 to 5 days. And all during this time they were fasting. And while they were in the medicine lodges were made out of willows and then out of skins that they would kind of hang over. Well, they would dig a hole in the middle of the medicine lodge and they would put rocks in the fire and then they would carry them in by sticks and put them in this little hole that they had dug. Then they would sprinkle it with water. Well, that would create kind of a sauna effect. Well, they were purifying themselves during this time. Then after they would purify themselves in the sweat lodges, then they would purify themselves with smoke. And the smoke would sometimes be sage, or the smoke would sometimes be sweetgrass. And they would purify themselves. What they were getting themselves ready for was the Sundance. How many people have watched the movie A Man Called Horse? You may have watched it, and during one of the scenes, you would watch them pierce a bone or a stick through their chest area. Now, this wasn't to prove how manly they were, how macho they were. This was to prove that they were special enough, I guess you could say, to receive the power. Well, after they would pierce the bones through their chest area, they would tie leather tethers through them or sinew or something, and then they would be pulled up, and then the other people would twirl them around, and they would twirl them around until the bones were pulled from their skin area. And this was just to be worthy of the spirits that came to them during their vision quest up here in the Two Medicine Valley. And of course, you could go through a Sundance ritual 4 or 5 times during your lifetime. It just depended on what you were seeking. It wasn't just, and both men and women did perform this. So it wasn't just a men thing, it was both genders. But my grandmother said that this area was just the place where all the powers seemed to be. And so they put 2 medicine lodges here so it just kind of hold the power and receive all the power up here. But in the beginning, the Blackfeet people believed that this was all created by Napi, but our real creator is called the sun. And the sun was sitting around one day, and he was very, very lonely. And so the sun decided, he started gathering all the stardust out there in the atmosphere together, and he started forming it into a big ball. Well, he got it formed into a big ball, and he just kind of set it out there in space, and he left it. Well, nothing happened. So the sun went up to the ball of stardust, and he blew on it. And then that's when our atmosphere was created. That was when air came to the earth. Well, it just kind of sat there. It didn't do anything. And the sun wanted somebody who he could visit with. So the sun took a little bit of the stardust out of earth, and he created our creator named Napi. Napi in English stands for old man. And Napi, like any child, can be a good boy, and he could also be a very naughty boy. But Napi and the sun could be our size, but then he could be also as big as the sun was. And so it just depended on what he wanted to do. Well, Napi would go on Earth, and he would walk over the Earth. And of course, the Earth kind of looked like the moon. And so Napi was walking around the Earth, and there was nobody for Napi to visit with. So Napi decided that he was going to create man. So Napi created man from the earth. He took a little bit of mud together and he mixed it together and he formed man. Well, man was very, very lonely. He came out and he was created and he wanted a special person. So Napi created woman out of mud also. And as Napi created man and woman, they walked around the earth and they noticed that the earth was just so barren. There was nothing on the earth. So man and woman decided that they wanted somebody else created. They wanted all the beings created, and all the things that you see today were created. So we had winged people, we had fished people, we had underwater people. And of course, with all those creatures, then we had to have all these things that you see around us here today created. So the trees were created, the plants, the bushes, all the flowers, everything that you see here were created by Napi. And of course, at that time, everyone believed that they were equal. We were no better than the tree better than us. Everybody was at the equal level. And Napi went around and he created all these beautiful things that you were able to see. But also Napi went around and created some bad things as well. Because Napi, being like a bad little boy, sometimes he would be punished, and when you get punished, sometimes you do the opposite. And so Napi did create some bad things here in the world. But through our teachings and everything, we were able to find out what some of those bad things were. And later on, you'll be able to find out what some of those bad things were. But with all this creation here, my grandmother told me that there was just this wide variety of food right out here in front of us. I mean, we may not realize it, but all these things out here in front of us there's a variety of food. Now, how many people remember Yule Gibbons? He was a gentleman back in the 1970s who liked to eat pine cones. Well, folks, he wasn't far off. He really actually had something that was really, really true. Now, out here in our wilderness, though, there are a lot of things good to eat. And one of those things is a pine tree, if you can believe it. Now, this tree right over here is what we call a subalpine fir tree. And a fir tree, if you go up and shake its hand or its branch and it's very soft and pliable, that is a fir tree. And so this fir tree was very, very easily to use, I guess you could say. The fir tree was used as medicine, as salves, as hair tonic, all sorts of things. Now, what you would use, the boughs, if you were to collect the boughs, you could put them in your shawls and your clothing, and it would create a very nice smelling scent. So it was kind of like potpourri. If you wanted your fire to smell good, you might put the pine boughs on the fire so that it would kind of have a nice aromatic smell. Now, if you were to make a medicine out of the needles, you would have to strip all the needles off. You would have to crush them up into kind of a powdery form. It would kind of look like aspirin after you got it all pounded up. And if you had an open wound, such like a blister or maybe a cut or something, you could sprinkle the pine powder in that wound, and that would help the healing. But let's say you had some sort of an infectious itch or eczema or psoriasis or something like that. You can mix the pine powder with a little bit of grease, and you could make it into a salve, and you could just cover your itchy spots with the salve, and that was to be able to control the itch. Now, the other thing is, the subalpine fir tree was also a very good remedy if you made it into a tea. You took the pine boughs and threw it into some water, and it started boiling. You could create a tea. Well, that tea was good for constipation. So you could drink that, and you wouldn't have any problems. The other thing is, the subalpine fir oil, that if you really powdered it up and you mixed it with a little bit of grease, you could create kind of like a hair tonic. And they said that it was to create, would help your hair grow. But of course, you wouldn't see the evidence of your hair growth until after a year or so of using it. And so in all reality, I don't know whether it would have been the hair tonic or not that you were seeing as far as the growth. But my grandmother, they used to live out in the country and everything, and they didn't have access to gum and candy and things like that, so they had to make do with what they had. And one of their gum products came from the subalpine tree. There are little blisters on the bark of the tree, and if you pop those blisters, you can get the pitch out of it. And my grandmother said that was very, very good. They used to chew it, and it was very, very sweet and everything. Well, folks, I have tried it, and I wouldn't recommend of chewing this kind of pitch, because it doesn't taste very good. It's very bitter. So if you do chew Dentine Carefree, I'd stick with it. But the pitch was also very good as kind of like Vicks Vapor Rub. If you mix the pitch with a little bit of grease or tallow, you could put it underneath your nose, and it was kind of aromatic. It would help open the sinuses. Or if you wanted to rub it on your chest, it was very aromatic, and it was also very soothing as well. But as far as food, the fir tree was not a very good basis for food. Another pine tree that we call the ponderosa pine, we don't find too many here on the east side of the park, but on the west side of the park you can find many of these trees. Well, what they would try to gather are the pine cones. The pine cones can get huge, and inside the pine cones are these huge nuts. And so what you would do is you would gather all the pine cones together, you would roast them in a fire, and when they were done, they would kind of pop open, kind of like a peach seed or something like that. They just kind of pop open. And the seed inside, or the meat inside the pine cone, was very, very tasty. And but you have to go over to the west side of the park area here to gather the pine cones. Now, the Indians used to call the Continental Divide the backbone of the world. And of course, when they would travel over to the west side, sometimes they would have to go in large groups. Now, the Blackfeet Indians were considered one of the fiercest tribes on the plains. They traveled many, many places. If you think of the borders that we have now, the Indians used to roam clear over as far as the North Dakota and South Dakota border, clear down to the areas of Yellowstone. And if you think of the border between Canada and Montana, they even traveled clear up into Canada. So these Indians did travel a very far distance. And there were hardly any tribes that would want to come up against them because the Indians were so fierce. But in all actuality, folks, I haven't hurt anybody in at least, maybe 3 hours now. So we're not all that bad. But as far as the fierceness, sometimes they would take raiding parties over to the west side of the mountains. And over on the west side, there were the Flatheads, the Salish, the Kootenays, and sometimes they would head over to these areas, and they would go in and raid the camp areas, and what they would do is they would steal some of the women. They would bring the women back over here and make them work as slaves for the Blackfeet. But of course, in return, sometimes the Flathead or the Salish or the Kootenai would travel over to this side, and they would try to steal the women over here. And I say try. Because the Blackfeet were considered one of the fiercest warriors on the plains, and not too many people would go up against them. But now, in all this gathering system up here in the Two Medicine Valley, you have to realize that there are 3 different groups of Blackfeet. There are the Bloods, the Siksika, and the Puukani, or what they call the Pagan down here. Puukani and Pagan are the same. Or we call ourselves the Scabby Robes. That's another name, but they're all the same peoples. But there were 3 different branches of what they call the Blackfeet Confederacy. And when the women were out gathering, because the women gathered the roots and the berries and all the things like that, and the men would go out and hunt. Well, you might be in a different little band. Each little section, the 3 sections, would have different bands out there. And the women would come up here to gather whatever they needed, and they would bring their rooting sticks and their tools and whatever they needed to start gathering their berries and everything up here. Well, during the time of gathering was from about May up until about September, because this is during the time when all the plants are coming out, things are very, very green and very, very luscious, and this was the time that they wanted to start gathering for the winter months, because you would have to start gathering these things so that you would have food through the winter, because you didn't want your family starving, so you would come up here and do the gathering. Well, during this time while they were gathering, this was also a very, very good time for socializing. Now, some of the women may have married and gone off into a different band. So your mother may have been in one band and you were in another band, and maybe grandma was in another area. And so this was a good time to come up here and socialize. You might be able to see mom and grandma and maybe sister who you haven't seen for in quite a while. And so you would come up here, and this was a good gathering time for socializing. And of course, when you would come up here, you would bring your daughters. Because your daughters who were like 11 and 12 years old, this was the time that you had to start teaching them about what roots to gather, what things to start looking for, what were the good things. The boys who were about 12 years old or older would go off with their fathers to learn how to hunt. But the toddlers, the young men who were under 12 years old, would come up here with their mothers. It was just a very good time for socializing. But it was also a very good teaching time as well, because you wanted to find out about some of these plants and things up here that were not good for you, but you also wanted to find out which plants were good for you. But Napi, our creator, sometimes he had kind of a bad temper ever so often. And one time he was walking in the woods, and he became very, very tired. And he came into kind of a little wooded area, and he decided that he was going to take a nap. Well, Napi laid down, and he was just getting at ease, and all of a sudden he heard this laughter and this giggling, and it was just so loud, and so he walked over, and he found these little mice. And they were playing, and they were dancing, and they were just singing up a storm, just having a good time. Well, Napi said, "Would you please be quiet? I'm going to try and get some sleep, so, you know, you need to quiet down now." And so the mice said, okay, Napi, we'll be quiet. So Napi went back over to his resting spot, and he laid down, and he was just going to sleep. And then all of a sudden, he heard the laughter and the singing and the dancing and everything. And Napi got up and he marched over there to the mice, and he said, "I asked you to please be quiet. So please be quiet. I'm trying to get some sleep." And the mice said, "Okay, we'll be quiet. We promise we'll be quiet." So Napi went back over to where he was sleeping. And he laid himself down, and he was just getting to sleep. And then all of a sudden, the noise grew again. The mice were playing, and they were dancing and singing, and Napi went over, and he roared at them. And the mice scattered. And he was mad, and he said, "I told you not to wake me up. I told you not to make this noise." Well, Napi knew where they ran to. All the mice ran into the Douglas fir tree. And they were all standing in the Douglas fir tree, and they were hiding. And Napi stood before the Douglas fir tree and said, "Mr. Douglas fir, I would like you to take care of the mice." And each little mouse was standing in an area, and they were standing on a pine cone. And so when Napi asked the Douglas fir to take care of the mice, each little pine cone would grab a mouse. And so all the mice that were hiding in the tree were now inside the pine cone. And folks, if you go around and you find a Douglas fir tree and you find a little pine cone, you will find a mouse as well, because in each little pine cone there's a little mouse, and you can see the evidence of the little tail sticking out and the 4 little feet. So if you come upon a Douglas fir tree, you might want to check out the little pine cones, because in each one there is a little mouse, and that's what happened to the mice when they were being so bad. But Napi wasn't always a good guy either, because he went around and he tricked a lot of people. And in his time when he was tricking a lot of people, sometimes he would make double plants. And we have lots and lots of huckleberries going on right now. And there's another bush that's called the manzanita bush, and it's right above the huckleberry bush. And there's these really little pink flowers, and they bloom into berries. Well, these berries are not as sweet. They're kind of bitter, sometimes sour, but he made them right at eye level. He made the huckleberry, though, about knee-high to thigh-high. And so that was for him to be seen. For us to be seen, where we would pick is just right at eye level. And so the huckleberry bush was just kind of this low little bush. And so that he would be able to gather all the huckleberries in later time. But Napi being the way he is, you can have a good Napi and you can have a bad Napi. And ever so often, Napi would create things that were very, very helpful. One of the things he created was the bear grass that we have around here. You can see some of the old stalks that have gone to seed around here, around the amphitheater. And these stalks, if you were to grate up the stalks and made it into a poultice, it was very good for inflammation. So if you had a break or a sprain, or maybe you may had inflammation from a cut or something, you could put the poultice on your cut or whatever you had, and it would draw out the inflammation. So that was one good thing. Napi also did quite a few other things here in the forest area, where he would make things that were very, very good for us. But they always had kind of a sticky outside. How many people know what the elk thistle looks like, or the Canadian thistle as they're called? Great, because the thistles are about this high. And sometimes they have white flowers on them, and sometimes they have pink flowers on them. But they are very, very sticky. And right now, the elk thistle would not be very good to eat. But if you get them before they bloom, from about mid-May to about mid-June, that was the perfect time that you could start gathering your elk thistle. Because once you would cut off the elk thistle and you started pulling back all the little thistles off of them, it tasted like celery. And so you could go out and gather all that stuff, and you could make them into stews or anything like that, and they were very, very delicious. We also have a little plant around here called a nodding onion, and it actually tastes like an onion, and it's very good also. And you could dry this little plant, and of course with the buffalo that the men of the tribe would hunt for, you could make a very, very good stew. But sometimes you have to add potatoes, and of course they didn't have potatoes back then, but they had lots and lots of different kinds of roots. Now, one of the roots was called blue camas. Maybe you have seen these before. And they bloom from about May through June. And there's not that many on this side of the mountains as there is on the west side of the mountains. But this blue camas has a root that's about 3 or 4 inches underneath the bottom of the plant, and the root itself is not very big, so you have to gather quite a bit of them. But what you could do is you could boil them, or else you could stick them in the fire and roast them like a yam or a potato, and they had a very good taste to it. And you could throw that into your stew as well. Or if you wanted a little bit of thickener, you could dry out the camas and you could pulverize it down and make it into a flour form, and that would be your thickener for your stews. Well, that wasn't the only thing that they used to use. They also used this glacier lily, or what people around here call the dogtooth violet. Now, believe it or not, this beautiful flower has a really deep root to it, and you have to dig quite a few of them because the root itself is not very big. It may be a dime size or maybe a nickel size, and you have to gather quite a few of them to have any kind of a flavor or anything like that. But you can do the same thing with this. You could either roast it in the fire like a yam or a baked potato, or else you could boil it, or else you could dry it and then pulverize it and use it as a thickener. But the double thing with the glacier lily is that it has these little steeples inside that taste like honeysuckle, so you could pull them out and taste them, and that was your sugar. So they were very, very sweet, so you could get a little bit of sugar along with your thickener as well. So that was kind of a double thing here.
How large of a plant is that?
The glacier lily, it's only about 1 foot to 1.5 feet high. I mean, they're not that big. But so you have to gather quite a few of them. And as the higher you get, you can still, I don't know whether you can still find glacier lilies now, but about 2 weeks ago you could still find a few of them. But you had to get out very early and find them to be able to gather enough of them to last you through the winter. Anybody else have questions? Well, as the berrying season is coming up upon us right now, the Indians used to use the berries quite a bit. They would gather quite a few of them throughout the season. Now, right now, we have the chokecherries out, we have elderberries, we have huckleberries, we have wild raspberries. In about 3 weeks, we'll have the thimbleberry. So there's just a wide variety of berries out there for us to sample and take from. But the Indians used to use berries in a mixture called pemmican. Now, pemmican is a mixture of beef or buffalo or elk or deer. It was a dried meat, and your berries and tallow. Now, tallow is the fat or whatever off the backs of animals. And the best place they used to be able to find the tallow was off the backs of the buffalo, because that was the purest form, because there was no meat mixed into it. And so you wanted very pure fat. And you would boil it so that it would be cooked. And you can mix it with an awful lot of different things. Now, you can make it with medicines, or you could put it in with your pemmican. Now, pemmican was kind of a ground-up mixture. And this little bowl and all has been passed down in my family for many, many years. Really, we don't know where it came from, but it's been passed down. And what you would do is you would have your dried meat, which came in huge sheets. I mean, these sheets were just really, really big. You would cut the meat, and then you would air dry it or smoke dry it, and then you would start pulverizing the meat after it dried. So you'd really mix and mix and mix. Well, then you would get a little bit of your berries. Now, because the berries were probably sun-dried, there was not much moisture, so you would throw that in there. And of course, then you would have to mix a little bit of your grease in, because you wanted a little bit of flavor, so you'd throw that in there, and you would just mix and mix and mix. When you knew that you had a good mixture, you could grab out your pemmican, you could hold it like that, and when you released it, it would stay in that form. You knew that you had enough mixture of everything in there. And your pemmican would last, probably 6 months. It would be stored in what they call parfleches. And parfleches were just skin bags, and they were sometimes waterproof, and you could just store this little mixture in it for up to 6 months. I guess you could call it the Indian Trail Mix. But it was very nutritious. It would last a long, long time. And it was very good for you because you could use the mixture in a lot of different ways. You could form it into patties and fry it up, or else you could sprinkle it into your stews, or else you could just eat it like this while you're out on the trails or whatever. They also had a mixture called berry soup. Berry soup was very, very good. I still make it today. And berry soup is made with any kind of berries that you can get, and you just kind of boil it with water, and you throw in a little bit of thickener. If you want to have a little bit of meat taste, you might throw in a little bit of dried meat as well. But normally it's just berries, and it's very, very good. It's just kind of like a hot syrup that you might pour over, say, a dumpling mixture or something like that. It's just very, very good, though. But right now was the berrying season, and of course a lot of the women would come up here and gather whatever berries that they could find. But Napi, being Napi, traveled all around the world. And one day Napi was walking along a stream area, and Napi looked down and he saw all these berries. And he thought, oh, I'm so hungry. So Napi jumped in, and he dove way down, and he didn't get to the bottom. And Napi came back up, and he was panting a little bit. And he said, I'm going to try again. And so he dove back down into the water. Well, he didn't get down to the bottom. Well, Napi decided, there's one way I can get to the bottom. So he tied rocks to his waist and to his feet, and then he jumped back into the water. Well, of course, the rocks took him down to the bottom, but it almost caused him to drown. And as Napi untied himself and got back up to the bank area, he was laying there, and he was furious. He was just mad, and he was mad at himself, and all of a sudden he looked up, and there were the berries. What he was looking at was the reflection from the berries. And so he walked over and he grabbed this stick and he started beating the bullberry bush. And he beat it so hard that the berries were falling off. And Napi said, from this day forward, when anybody will come to pick berries from you, they will have to beat you with a stick, because from this day forward you will have long thorns on you. And so as you look around today, if you do find a bullberry bush, they do have long thorns, and in order to pick bullberries, you do have to beat them with a stick, because that's the better way to do it. So Napi caused that one. But folks, not only did they have food that they relied on, but a lot of their artwork and a lot of the things that they would do, they had to get from nature. Now today we can go down to the local art stores and pick up whatever paint that we need, but back then they had to think of a lot of different ways to find their paint. Now the black was kind of an easy choice, because they could go and they could get the charcoal from the fire areas, and they could mix that with a little bit of grease and they'd be okay. But what about our yellows and our blues? Green was okay, because as you look around here, you can see all the green colors that you can possibly use, because of course the chlorophyll and just mix it with a little grease, and that came up with your green color. Well, what about the blues that we have, the really bright blues? Well, where they would get that from were from our feathered friends, our ducks. They would go down and they would start gathering the duck droppings. Now they call it dung. And you'd have to gather quite a bit, and you would dry the dung, and then you would pulverize it, and you'd mix it with a little grease, and it came out with the prettiest blue color. But of course, I don't know, folks, whether I'd want to put that on my face or not. The alder bush, or the alder tree, came out with the browns and the yellows. If you boil the bark and then dry it, you can pulverize it up, and it comes into, you can kind of form yellows and browns and oranges from that. So that's where you kind of got from those colors. Reds was kind of a hard one. Now here in the park area, probably one of the most prevalent flowers that you will notice is the Indian paintbrush. And actually the red that you see on here, that's the leaves. That's not actually the petal part. Inside there's some green stuff, and that's actually the flower. But the red are the leaves. And of course the Indians would use the Indian paintbrush to receive the red color, because they would grind that up, and they would be able to get the color from that. Now some of the pinks were gotten from the Lewis monkey flower because it's such a bright and prevalent color. And so the Lewis monkey flower was a very, very bright purplish, pinkish color. And right now they're very prevalent along the trail areas. And of course they didn't have the tools that we have today like the paintbrush or the pen or the pencil. What they used to use was sticks or bones or a tool maybe that they were able to carve, but something that they could use. But there was a distinction between the men and the women again, like the men hunting and the women gathering. Well, the men were the ones that could draw the realistic pictures. So anytime you see a realistic picture done, you'll know that was done by a man. The women, they were allowed to do the geometric designs. And so as you go into the museum, a good place to start looking for some of these designs are down at the museum, the Plains Museum in Browning, Montana. You'll see a good variety of the different artwork that the men would do and the women would do. But it definitely was, women would do the geometric designs and the men would do the actual, the visual signs or the real pictures. But as you travel around the park area, there are a lot of different areas here that the Indians came up here to use. But here in the Two Medicine Valley, it definitely was a very sacred area. The people, this was the last part of the park that became part of the park in 1911. In 1895, actually, this is when the Indians sold 1 million acres to the federal government. And there was a condition back then that said that the Indians could come in here and hunt, collect wood, and fish. Well, by 1911, that kind of was drawn back as well because this part of the park became, or what they call a free zone, became part of the park. And so the Indians were no longer able to come up here to collect whatever they need. Now right now there is kind of an agreement between the park and the tribal council and the tribal people that say they can come up here and collect if it's for some sort of a ceremony or something that you're using. And but the park, you know, of course, that you can't pick flowers. So you have to be a tribal member to be able to come up here and do that. But you'll notice I don't have any of the plants to show you because I do work for the Park Service and I feel that to preserve these plants is probably a little bit more beneficial than bringing them to show you what they look like. And so that's part of the reason why I don't have things to show you. Because it is a little bit more important to preserve all the things that you've been able to see around here and to preserve all the things that Napi was able to create. So there's just one thing. If you're going out to sample some food, make sure that you do have some sort of a guide with you, something that tells you a little bit about the plant, because not all plants are good for you. There is a plant that we have here in the park area that is called false hellebore. It can stand from 1 foot to 3 feet high. It has big leaves on it that are pleated and kind of have veins on them, kind of look like banana leaves or kind of like a corn stalk. Well, this is called the corn lily. Well, the Indians used to call it sneeze root. There is about 6 inches or so of root below the plant base. And that root you could cut off and you could pulverize it, and if you had a sinus problem, you could sniff it, and it would cause lots and lots of sneezing. But folks, the leaves are the things that are very, very toxic. If animals such as cows or sheep or horses eat this type of thing, it causes lots and lots of problems. It can cause deformities in animals that are pregnant. And so you don't want to eat the leaves, and you don't really want to eat the plant, but there's the root that you can use, and it is called the sneeze root, so it is very good for you. But as you're going out and you're looking at each one of these plants, you might want to ask yourself, what can I make this into? Now there is one plant that all of us know about, that's the dandelion. And look how many uses the dandelion has. We can use it as paint. All the kids in the audience know about the painting effect you can use. You can use it in salads. You can make dandelion wine. So there's just lots of different varieties of things that you can use these plants for. But before you go out and start gathering, make sure you know what you're doing. And make sure you have a good book about the area that you may be in. But folks, I just want to say one thing. Preservation is the key here. And so whatever you take out of the woods, please use it. If you don't use everything, please give it back, because that is the cycle of life here. Because it was always told to me that whatever you take from the earth, you give back to the earth. So if there's just a little something that you don't use, you might want to give it back. And of course, then it'll be kind of recycled as well. But does anybody have any questions? Well, I just want to thank you very much for coming tonight, and if you do have any questions and want to talk, I'll be here after the program. So thank you very much for coming. Sorry about my smoky fire.
I know along the Missouri River.
Those people, that could be a Blackfoot from down there, because there are two different names here in the States. Well, thank you. Thank you. Right. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for coming.
sleepless.
Pictures on the wall.
Did you start off as Eddie's Club?
Back in, 74, I guess it was, 73 or 74. And it was just a shotgun bar then. It wasn't fancy as it was now. Of course, there wasn't too many fancy bars around that we'd go to. We considered the hippie Indian class. And the Zimmerinos used to be the senior citizen center. That's why the pictures originally came from.
Oh, I remember that.
And of course, them pictures are, I think, they're tied up in court at this time from some friends of ours that have a dispute on who owns them. And during the daytime, all the seniors would come over to Eddie's and drink beers and whiskeys and so forth. And then at night, the hippies and the Indians would show up. And the bikers, forgot to put them in there. They would show up, what few there were at that time. And then it became, then it closed, and Luke's opened up, so everybody went to Luke's, because it was more of a rowdier bar, and we were still kind of young at that time. We still think we're young, but after that statement that woman made today about it, pretty good for a bunch of old guys. Kind of popped our bubble.
You thought you were young radicals?
Yeah, well, we were young radicals, I guess, at one point. Now we're old radicals, senile. It takes kind of a hard thing to deal with some of the younger generation because they don't realize that some of the issues that they're dealing with now were the same issues we were dealing with 20 years ago. So everybody's glad to see that the ecology thing has come along. Of course, women's rights hasn't moved up very much, nor is the any depletion in racism. Always remained the same. So there's a lot of things that can be improved on, but when we got people moving as fast in population now, say as we had 20 years ago, we're only reaching a small percentage of people that are actually learning anything.
You mean there's more people?
There's there's twice as many people now than there was 20 years ago. So we're reaching out to more people, but we have a larger population.
You know, I never thought about that.
That's the whole, what is that, zero population growth thing. They estimate, it's just an estimate, that they're gonna max out in the next 200 years. That means there's not gonna be enough room to support the amount of people that's on the earth. So, but people say, well, that's further down. It's the same old things. That's not my problem. Technology will deal with that later on. But if you don't start thinking about it now and trying to act on it now, it's never going to go anywhere.
Do you do anything?
Oh, I try and get as many recycling things going as possible, but even some of the recycling can go a lot further. People be more conscious of. I mean, a lot of activists, I guess you could call them, are they consume a lot and waste a lot. I was down in Estes Park last summer, I guess it was, to the Greens National Gathering, and some of these people's ideas were bordering on the edge of fascism. They wanted to control what people ate. Not only as to what is taught in schools, but they wanted to control their diets.
Oh, they're going to be vegetarians?
Yeah, everybody's going to be vegetarian. So I had to point out that there are some people that they can eat all the tofu they want in the world, but they'll get no protein out of it because their system's built different. And some of these people happen to live in the jungles of the Amazon. So you can't go in there and tell them that they can't eat snake anymore. Otherwise, they'd die out from lack of protein and disease. The thing was brought out years ago when the gatherings that the Indians went through was the diet. And because of the overabundance of commodities, the bulk starch, and what beef there was, and not instead of a wild game, that it affected the diet. And the whole breakdown of the Native Americans' body structures. They weren't handling it very well. They were getting all this starch and all this other stuff, but they were not getting the meat that they were accustomed to. And so they just now, that's been about 15 years ago. Just now they're beginning to come up with, well, of course, we could not really explain it because we were just Indians. We were not scholars and Harvard and all these other places, Yale and so forth. And so who are we to talk because we were not qualified? So now that they're beginning to come out, the health specialists are coming out and say, yes, we've discovered that the diet does have something to do with the people. So it's their credibility and how it's presented to the other world, so to speak. There is another world. I mean, people find this, well, you know, like, that's all in the past. You know, it's just, people don't believe that anymore. Everybody's create equal is written here in these history books. But when you live the lifestyles in the areas with the people, whether it be up here among the Indians or, and say, with the Chicanos down in Southern California, or the blacks in Chicago or New York, you'll find that society is not the way it's written in the books.
Yeah.
And so there's two different worlds. There's this world and there's that world. And there's the givers and the takers, so to speak. For every taker to get ahead, so many has got to give. They got to keep giving and giving and giving until this one becomes stronger. And that's the two societies. That's basically like our two political parties. And right now we have the liberals, which is basically, I guess they're not really liberals according to history.
Oh, who's the liberals?
The Democrats. And then we have Republicans who are conservative. And of course, we know they're not very conservative either. They spend like it's going out of style. So there was somebody running an analogy of that, and it doesn't, I mean, the words have been turned around. That's what that old phrase, this, means. Is, you're speaking two different languages.
Fork. It's not the forked tongue.
Yeah. You're speaking two different languages. You're saying one thing meaning another.
So were you relating this to like the environmental movement or something like that?
Especially the so-called New Age people in the Green Society, whereas they want to be able to control how everybody is supposed to live. And they haven't gotten through their mind yet that everybody cannot live the same. In order for everybody to live the same, you have to take the brains away from them. And I think the government's trying to do that already without the Green Party. So they have a long ways to come. They have to figure out that it's a large area. So they broke it down into bioregions. Okay, we have our bioregion over here, and New York has their bioregion over there. And these people should be able to have some idea, say what's going on in their bioregion, because we're not going to get anybody to listen to somebody from, say, Tampa, Florida, to tell them how to manage their buffalo or their wolves or their bears. They're going to say, wait a minute, you have many bears down there in Tampa, Florida? So we finally get across to these people that you'll have to allow people from their own areas to make decisions as far as management. You know, you just can't go out and tell everybody that they got to give up their land. I mean, that's a good way to create a civil war in this territory. And it generally does about every 10 years. Just dealing with Park Service, Bureau of Land Management. We have all these federal agencies out here managing things. Well, we have the federal agencies out here, but nobody's managing anything. And for one thing, there's no money going into it. We're not getting qualified people, and the qualified people we have are being stretched too far, too thin. I've been listening to people get upset with, you know, say take this, the Forest Service. They get upset with the Forest Service, but they don't understand that the Forest Service budget has been cut steadily for the last 20 years.
Well.
And that amounts to how you're going to manage if you keep cutting back further and further on your people. And the people they're cutting back on are some of the people with skills, and they're replacing them with volunteers doing.
Yeah, and that's another story.
And so it goes into, and so if they took some of that money that was going into, say, Nicaragua or in the Middle East, and they could sustain, because the Forest Service was created by environmentalists. And so I guess basically people my age of the baby boomer period, our parents were basically the problem of what flipped everything around, because they were in that Industrial Revolution period when they were coming. Of course, not so much as my parents were, but the people of my age.
You mean your parents?
Well, my father worked for the railroad. He was a quarter blood. My mother was a full blood. That's where I get most of my heritage. And he was white enough to pass as white man. So that's how he got on the railroad.
Otherwise, he wouldn't have?
No, absolutely not. They don't hire Indians on the railroad. Well, now they do. They didn't back in the 50s.
Oh.
So, well, that's actually how he got into a white unit in World War II, is because all the Indians were put in Indian units and blacks put in black units and so forth and so on. All run, of course, by white officers. But when he worked on railroad, we lived here in Missoula, Spokane, Wenatchee, all throughout here, as well as he did some logging up in Sealy Lake at that time. And there was plenty of bears then. I hear people complain about the animals now, but when you put all these people here, you're gonna have to get rid of the animals. It's either stop having babies or get rid of the animals. I mean, as simple as that. You can't go out in the woods and have 60 kids running around and expect to have
60 when you come out.
And have a bunch of animals up there too. You know, it's still hard to believe that people actually go into the park and read the literature and get mauled, gored, kicked, stepped on. But they do. They get charged by moose. Oh, look at the moose. I don't want to get my picture by him. Because they have no sense of it. I don't know what's scarier, the lack of fear in the wild game, or the stupidity in a two-legged game. The lack of education, I think. And education is the only thing that I always advocate. And people say, well, what would you suggest? I said, better teaching. I said, not better programs, because I've witnessed many programs. Being an Indian, of course, you grew up watching program after program. How I ended up in Los Angeles is through one of those programs. In 1957, they figured it was a damn good idea to assimilate Indians best into the melting pot if we relocated them to a metropolitan area. So the old man quit the railroad, and we loaded up the family, headed to Los Angeles.
No.
Yes, that was back in 1957. And it was just as smoggy then as it is now.
Wow.
It's, I couldn't breathe downtown. I was kind of an asthmatic kid at that time. Maybe it was because of moving there. So we moved out to Santa Monica to a low-rent district there when they still had one. So that I could breathe the air coming out to sea. But now, that same area is, I can see that happening here. Is what they're doing, what they did there is the land developers came in and said, well, this is a real dump, this is a slum. The property here ought to be really cheap. So let's buy up as much as possible. They bought the land, condemned the houses, and took bulldozers and leveled it, put two, what they were called high-rises in them days, up, that went up, something 30 stories or something, a golf course around it, and a fence, and 3 keys to get into the garage and the whole shop. and forced all the low rent people out. So they had to move away. And I can see that happening here as people are coming in and looking at the low rent areas and saying, there's cheap housing there. We can buy house.
Yeah.
And so that's forced a lot of the, there's a lot of retired people from basically, the north side used to be a railroad community. It was a railroad town. And people retired off the railroad can't afford to pay for a new sidewalk, a new curb.
Uh-huh.
And so, I guess, they run from like $3,000 to on up anymore, just to put a sidewalk out in front of your house and a curb and paint it. And so, I don't know if they're aware of it, but they're in their strive to have the ideal community, they're forcing other people out. I'm not sure that they actually care. I see a lot of that these days. People, I never witnessed so much rudeness in my life. It's, people walk right up and turn their back to somebody and just get between them and whoever they're talking to, or walk in front of them rather than behind them. It's one of the things that we were taught as kids is, just don't be rude to people. I don't know too damn many people sometimes. I know teachers, instructors. It's our good man Victor Charlo, who I recognize as our next traditional leader since his father died. A lot of people, other people don't, but that's their problem.
Well, is it up for debate or?
No.
Is he the next leader? Oh, spiritual leader is one thing, huh?
Traditional.
Oh, traditional leader.
Yeah. Well, your traditional leader is a spiritual leader. To us.
Yeah.
As Salish type people.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yeah, because Victor almost graduated from the seminary there at, I don't know, I don't think they call it St. Pat Seminary, but that's where the new hospital, there used to be a seminary there.
Oh.
Where they taught people how to become priests, whatever that consists of.
He was going to be a priest.
Yes, and then he dropped out. And then he went to school, and he dropped out. Then he went back to school. And he opened up what he called the Dropout U at Two Eagle River School up there at Dixon.
Oh, did he start that?
Yeah.
Oh. I didn't know that. Dropout U? What was it for high school kids?
Yes, it was alternative school for kids that couldn't handle it in the public school. How the tribe is doing these days?
Yeah.
Actually, I feel we've come a long ways in the last 20 years or so. We've spent a lot of money on a college, but it's one of the only colleges that has a decent forestry program and environmental program. We've developed our language into a written language so that it can be taught to other people now. Even after the last of the old people are gone, which they are going fast. And we saved a lot of history. We saved a lot of culture. So, like the alternative school has created a large interest from the kids, all kids on the reservation, into the traditional ways, because all the culture camps that were run by Agnes Vandenberg, who's gone now, everybody was welcome, and a lot of well, as you've seen with Billadou's daughter, she's not exactly one of the darkest little Indians I ever saw. And we have a lot of, well, I have two first cousins who are not enrolled, who are didn't have enough degree to be on the rolls, because like their mother was like my father, who was only a quarter, and her father, who had no degree, so that would have made them like an 8, just a little bit small to get on the rolls. But there's programs still benefit them through the family, spouse, whatever. Look at old Blinkenbeard up there. If they lose any more of their Indian relations there, they're going to have to give up their big show, because the only reason they can hang on to the Mule Palace is because one of the relations was married to an Indian.
Oh.
And so if all the Indian side of the family die, and then the tribe takes it. It's kind of like a way that England deals with its Medicare program, or its medical program. What do they call it? Where the country runs the socialized medicine. Is when the person dies, unless somebody goes and moves into their house right away, the state takes it back.
Oh, handy.
So it says if you don't want to move it back to England, you might as well let the state take it. Of course, I wouldn't mind moving to England and be a change. But I don't know. I probably wouldn't handle the cities there anymore. I can't handle the cities here. But the education on the as far as well, see, we got the big dispute coming up now because in '95 we're supposed to get our dam back, Kerr Dam. Of course, we're supposed to get it back a while back too. And a lot of people don't like that idea because then they have to be paying the rent to us rather than to a power company. And you don't want Indians becoming power companies. Becoming in power, empowering Indians.
Just can't have it, whatever it is. Oh.
And we'd be able to buy back the rest of the reservation. We're buying back quite a bit of it now, as much as possible, because that's one of the things that was voted on a while back was what best to do with some of our profits. And people says, let's start buying back our home.
Yeah.
And which is we've been invaded, and now we know who lives here.
The crows.
There's some blackbirds in there too. Crows.
Let's try and get them.
Where'd you get those?
Sheep.
Get them before they get us. They saw you, pointed at them.
Camera shy. They know it's shooting something.
Oh, here comes some more. This is the next batch.
Oh, I see. This tribe knocked out.
The other tribe, huh? Yeah, there's nothing. Whoa. Wildlife trees.
How much land do you think they'd have to buy back? I mean,
let's see. The last time I used to know all those figures. The last time, which was a long time ago, that I actually worked for a program that did all this research and stuff. About 1 million acres would probably be a safe guess, I'd say.
1 million acres?
Yeah, that's about half.
Oh.
Well, see, they have this. When they did the Allotment Act and the Homestead Act, they kind of planted these communities right in the middle of the reservation. So like Polson and Ronan, St. Ignatius, right in the valley. And so they just kind of put this big gap right in the middle, and it was basically all they wanted was the bottom land for farming. And so what the tribes pretty much retained is the timber that surrounds.
Now they want. No.
Well, yeah, they did to a certain extent. A lot of people neglected to bring out the point that it was the tribes that created the Mission Mountain Wilderness.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but a lot of people just kind of overlook it. You know, so, well, like we did that 15 years ago or so. And we had big disputes over it. They wanted to log that whole west face off. And I said, nah. And we managed to hold them at the ditch bank as much as possible. And so, well, we'd log up to the ditch bank. And so we had to take a common ground on that one. But otherwise, they wanted to try and get in their Columbia helicopters and get all that off the front. So it was the people that pushed that, which in a way protected, did a hell of a lot more to protect the bears than the Flathead or Lowell National Forest did on the other side, because they knocked that highway through there. Once they knocked that highway through, the population follows. When I was a kid, my dad worked over there logging at Seal Lake, and the bears just come down every night. And when they're at that time the road ended at Sealy on one end and ended at Swan Lake on the other, and in between is what was called a wagon trail. So if you wanted to four-wheel it, an old Jeep or something, possibly get stuck for a couple of days, you go ahead and head up that road. And the bears frequented back and forth. At that time, there was probably, anywhere from 300 to 350 bears within that area, which is quite a bit for such a small area, because they could travel from the Missions into the Bob Marshall and so forth, and then on north. And then when they knocked that highway through, they put a boundary right down the middle, and so naturally they're more accessible to hunters, poachers, whatever. And then people start moving their stock into the meadows and stuff, so naturally they were being killed off from raiding stock, as well as other game. So when you knock a highway through there, you can pretty much figure out that, it's pretty dry, but people are going to start buying it. I mean, you can drive up that road now and still see at least 75 acreage signs for sale. Anywhere from 0.5 to 200 acres.
Who's selling it?
Whoever the hell has got their hands on it. Probably some of Lindbergh's relation. There's a number of agencies around town that specialize in land. A lot of people come across land years ago through families and so forth, and now they're trying to develop it. Which is, is a good capitalist thing to do, is that rival capitalism, but I wish they wouldn't do it in my backyard.
No, it's appropriate. But if you feel like talking about your life in Vietnam and...
What, other than I was scared out of my mind? Took a lot of drugs.
Okay. Well, I don't know, it's like you talk about... I've heard you talk about how now you're kind of into helping people, or this is kind of one of your main deals because it's your...
Well, it's trying to replace all the destruction that you did when you were ignorant or not informed, I guess. Destructive, it was just you put yourself in a frame of mind where you really didn't care a whole lot you really didn't want to care a whole lot for anything because you didn't want to lose it. So you just, everything became, nothing became something that you really cared much about or gave much thought to. The only thought was, the countdown and where you were going next, and so forth. And so you become very destructive, I guess, to yourself as well as to others and other inanimate things and stuff. Because the drugs are great. You could easily get lost in drugs. And a lot of people did. And
how could they, I don't know,
well, like there's heroin was readily available, opium was another one. And
in the jungle? I mean, it's like...
Oh, no, you can get it anywhere. Well, see, they all these little bills, like, a friend of mine just got back from South America, and I was looking at some of her maps, and she was pointing all the little dots were basically just little villages, 10, 15 people there. They're just clans, basically, they're scattered all these people everywhere. It's not like going out in the wilderness here. It's, like there's... it's some of the severity is kind of similar, like going from Cut Bank coming up to the Glacier. The severity mountains go up and then out and then drop down into another big plateau of rice fields, and some places where and you go to. It wasn't uncommon to go just from one. Of course, that's locations, from one climate type to another. So there's a lot of similarities in the landscape. But the destructive thing, and later on it became more destructive. Then you get to thinking about, I guess, oh, we got a camper's coming. I guess it was, I think, Alcatraz, when I heard about Alcatraz.
Hi.
Howdy. When I heard about Alcatraz, I think was when I started getting the old awareness back. There's a lot of that left when I lived in Los Angeles. I used to, in order to keep myself getting beat up a lot, I used to go along with being a Chicano.
I mean, they beat up Indians?
They didn't know what an Indian was. I thought I was being a smart ass.
Oh.
Yeah, me too. And a lot of Hispanics are Indians, and a lot of people don't realize that.
Mexican.
Yeah, they have their language mixes with the Castilian into the Yaqui and so forth. But in the inner cities, they're either Chicano or black. So I really didn't pick up too much toward traditionalism until later on, and I really didn't pick up a whole lot on it. And a friend of mine kind of encouraged me to. We had, this was back in the early biker days, and he'd come across this book of, I think it was one of his old, what was that book? I know it was. It was one of those old Ben Brown Indian lore books. He'd come across this book and say, hey, look what I got. And so he says, can you do this, can you do that? So we started making moccasins and other things.
Oh.
Then later on, oh hell, that must have been about another 5 years later. I was out in Lake Minnetonka and we got
Minnesota?
Yeah, you know where they make Tonka toys. Things kids throw at you.
Yeah.
That really hurt.
Tonka toys.
Well, they don't make them out of iron anymore, but they used to. And we got more into. And I came back through here, and I hadn't been back in this territory in about since I went to school out here in boarding school. I decided I was going to stay. Then I started getting back and started talking to the elders, and the teaching of caring for people, and caring for the plants that care for the people, and caring for the earth, caring for the plants. I think I know this song. And it made me feel good again. Some of the, I guess some of the fear went away from
Fear
of not caring.
Oh.
Because that's what they explain. It says fear is one of the biggest enemies. It's a weakness, and you don't want to admit that you're afraid of anything. So you replace fear with what you think is hate or dislike, and that's just another weakness. And it basically evolves back to ignorance, which is another weakness, which you don't want, which you might fear. Here we go into the song again. And so I started feeling better about things. I got more. Then I started getting frustrated. Of course, naturally, you always get into things, and you run into a lot of brick walls, rock walls, jailhouse walls.
Oh.
And then you have to get on a crusade thing. Of course, when I think everybody gets out on a crusade now and then. So the helping people,